guys, and welcome back to Z3 Cubing. I am here at Colorado Cubing Weekend 2022, the biggest competition I've been to in years, spanning 2 days and hosting multiple rounds of 13 different events. So let's check it out. So I'm not warmed up, haven't practiced at all. Time for the first round of Pyraminx.
Pyraminx went as Pyraminx usually does, which is to say, not great. Now this isn't a joke, but I'm pretty sure I've actually practiced more Pyraminx this year during competitions than otherwise. So needless to say, it hasn't been a huge priority for me, but it definitely is on the list of events that I would like to get more into in the somewhat near future.
Well, that was pretty rough. I think it was an 8-second average. Luckily, there's a round 2 and 3 coming up. Two by 2 time. Slightly more warmed up now, hoping for a sub 5 average.
Well, that didn't quite happen, but as you can see, it was very close. I just messed up that last solve there. 2 by 2 is another event that I haven't improved in forever. I would theoretically like to get better at it just because so many competitions hold it, but I just don't realistically see myself practicing it or learning something new like CLL in the near future.
I think that's barely good enough for sub 5, but either way, we should make it to round 2, so that's good. Alright, time for one-handed. I've been practicing this a ton, so I definitely want to get a PR average.
One-handed was certainly the most tragic event at this competition. I finally got around to learning all of my OLOs and PLLs with one hand. I've been practicing it like crazy, averaging like 25 seconds, and then I get to my first round of competition, I mess up 2 or 3 solves, and average 31, so that was a bit of a letdown.
Well, I don't know if that was nerves or bad luck, but that was easily 5 seconds slower than what I normally average. Hopefully I make it to round 2, so I can redeem myself.
Lunchtime.
Anyway, now it's time for a normal 3x3. I just got a 9 in practice, so hopefully this goes well.
I kind of stopped seriously practicing 3x3 after I got that 1402 PR average, but I think I've actually improved a little since then because I seem to be averaging more like mid-13s in practice. The problem with 3x3 is that because it's the main event, I tend to get more nervous and solve less consistently during competitions, so I guess I just need to take a break from it and stop caring as much about it.
A couple 13s, a 14, and a couple 15s, so not a terrible average, but not a PR either. And 4x4 time. Been practicing this a little bit. PR average would be nice.
4x4 is an event that I've never really focused on, but I've always gotten consistently faster over the years, and this competition was no exception. I guess I just must have had fast turning, good look ahead, and a lot of good luck on parity.
Alright, PR single, PR average. I'm really happy with that round. Skewb time. I PR'd recently in this event, but, you know, I wouldn't mind another PR.
So I haven't exactly been practicing Skewb a lot since I set that PR at my last competition, but I feel like my recognition for some of those trickier cases has been gradually improving. That's my biggest weakness at this point in Skewb, so at least we're trending in the right direction.
And that was a mid-5 average, which I think was my second best official average ever, very close to that PR. And 5x5. I've been practicing my big cubes a lot, so let's see how this goes.
Even though I've gotten a lot faster at 5x5 over the last few years, the funny thing is, it was still pretty hard to beat that old PR average because I think it was a bit of a fluke. I was averaging around 2 minutes at the time, but just got 2 really good singles during the average.
Alright, pretty nice 5x5 average. Mid 140 average, which beats my PR by about 5 seconds, and a PR single. After 20 minutes of torturous clock scrambling, it's time to compete in clock. I've also been practicing this one a bunch. I'm hoping for a couple PRs.
After totally messing up my clock average last competition, but then still setting a PR, I realized that I had a ton of potential in this event, mostly due to the new Chi clock, so I spent an afternoon practicing it. The only real thing I changed was realizing that you don't always have to hold 12 o'clock up, and I instantly dropped like 3 seconds off my average, from 14 down to around 11.
Well, I guess practicing for a few hours yesterday paid off. I've only gotten a few 9s in my life, and I got a counting 9 in that average, so double PRs, needless to say. Last event of the day, Megaminx. My current PRs are pretty good in this event, but we'll see how I can do.
This is another funny one because around 4 years ago, I for some reason went through a phase of just practicing Megaminx a bunch, and I actually got pretty decent at it, and so now coming back as a much better cuber years later, it was actually still kind of hard to beat that old average. But as you can see, I did manage to beat that average, although not the single, so I guess I still have some work to do. Nowadays, I'm not a huge fan of Megaminx, it just seems like an endless F2L look-ahead torture device.
And last solve of the entire competition today for a pretty good mid-130 Megaminx PR average. That's more PRs in a day than I've gotten in a very long time, so needless to say, I am very happy and the competition is only half over, so I'll see you back here tomorrow morning. Alright, day 2 is going to be super busy with second rounds and finals, but first this morning we have 4 new events, starting with the very worst, Square 1.
So the second day of the competition started off with the obligatory I hate Square 1 but I'm going to do it anyway round. This is a really funny event for me because I pretty much learned how to do it and got really fast at it way back in 2016 and literally have not improved at all since then. So I guess that makes this event a good candidate to learn some more algs, learn how to turn better, learn how to actually do cube shape, and just practice a bunch and get a whole lot faster at. That might be coming in the near future.
That's got to be my most consistent ever Square 1 average, although not quite a PR. Next up, Blindfolded.
Just like my last few competitions, 3x3 Blindfolded was pretty sad with no successes, especially since everyone who didn't just DNF automatically made it to finals. The first attempt felt pretty good as I was doing it, but I must have messed a bunch of things up because the cube was a total mess in the end. The second attempt also felt pretty good, it was a harder scramble, and I actually did pretty well. I was off by 3 edges in the end, it must have just been a quick memorization mistake. And because this competition had a cumulative time limit of 10 minutes, and I averaged 4 or 5 minutes, that means that I only got to do 2 attempts, which is kind of annoying, but I guess I'm just slow.
Okay, not sure what happened there, off by 3 pieces, but now it's time for 6x6.
Like I mentioned, I have been practicing my big cubes recently, and 6x6 is probably the one I was most confident in, but as you can see, the mean started off very well with a nice PR single, but then quickly went downhill with 2 very consistent, but very slow times. I find myself getting nervous a lot in 6x6 and 7x7 in competitions because they're such rare events that you barely ever get to do, and the mean format means that you don't get to make any mistakes, and so I tend to do pretty inconsistently.
Alright, nice PR single, but not quite a PR mean. Next up is 7x7, where it's going to be a race against the cutoff of 5 minutes. My PR is 5:07.
Okay, signing up for 7x7 was a bit of a long shot when I averaged 30 seconds above the cutoff, but you know, crazier things have happened, but crazy things did not happen this time, and I got pretty much exactly what I averaged. So I didn't get to finish the mean, but at least I got my first ever official single. The only other competition I've ever got to do 7x7 at was 5 years ago now. I not only missed the cutoff, but I also missed the time limit of 7 minutes. I solved it in just over 7 minutes, so that went in as a DNF on my profile.
Well, I saw that coming. At least it's a PR single. Next up is lunch. Yum. Okay, now this is going to be a crazy afternoon. I'm competing in 8 different second rounds and probably a couple third rounds. First up is 3x3.
In the second round of 3x3, I averaged about the same as in the first round, and this average was remarkably consistent, with just over a second separating my worst and my best times. The only problem is that instead of getting 13s and 14s like I do in practice, I was getting 14s and 15s. So as I was saying before, I think I'm just going to give it some time. There's no shortage of rounds of 3x3s at competitions, so eventually I should be able to get a decent 13 average.
Well, that was very consistent, but slightly below average. Next up, 2x2.
I was in 2x2 round 2 group 2, so that's fun. And all I really have to say about this round is that if I hadn't misrecognized the PBL on that last solve, I would have gotten a sub 5, I would have been top 12, and moved on to the finals, but that didn't happen. Another consistently mediocre average, time for Pyraminx. Other than the 5, this was a remarkably consistent second round Pyraminx average with a 692 and a 692. Also, I just realized that my PR average of 5.34 was set literally back in 2017, so yeah, I should probably start practicing this event a little bit more. Guess what? A subpar Pyraminx average. Time for 4x4. Now I thought the first round of 4x4 at this competition was a miracle, but then it happened again. I was feeling really good in practice, and then I went up there, got really lucky with parity, other than that last solve, and set another PR average. So yeah, not much to say, except that a little bit of practice practice in an event you don't focus in can make a huge difference. This is really my first competition in years where school has been out, so I've had a lot of free time to practice beforehand, and as a result, I set a ton of PRs.
That was amazing. I had PR average guaranteed with those first 4 solves. And next up, the last round before the real finals is Skewb.
Skewb continued going pretty well with another mid-5 average. I think I got 4th place in the first round and 3rd place in this round, which made me pretty optimistic going into the finals. You're gonna have to wait and see how that turned out though. Again, the few slower solves, and even sometimes the 5s, are just a result of me pausing for a second or two to recognize the case. So I guess the only solution to that is just to practice a ton and get better at recognition.
Very close to a PR average, but at least that'll make finals. Next up are a bunch of events that I did not make finals in, followed by, I believe, Megaminx.
In Megaminx Finals, I would have liked to get another PR average, or at least a PR single, but ended up getting neither. I know there is a lot of potential left on Megaminx for me. I feel like I'm not quite comfortable with all the F2L cases on such a big cube, and so I spend a lot of time staring at the pieces, so my look ahead suffers a lot. And there's just so many colors, it's hard to hold everything in your head as you're looking for different pieces and swapping between cross colors. I guess that all comes with practice though.
Well, that had potential for a good average, but apparently not. Now it's time for square one, because apparently I made the finals.
Time for part 2 of I Hate Square One, let's do it anyway. Starting off with the classic above cutoff solve, but it doesn't matter because you're in the finals. The funny thing was, pretty much everyone who could scramble square one quickly was in this round, so there was a huge backup at the scrambling table, and for some reason my cube got held up. And so as I was starting like my 3rd solve, pretty much everyone else was finishing their average. They're also just about to call up clock finals, which I was in, so I was going as fast as possible to try not to hold up the competition, and I guess I solved square one well under pressure because I did pretty well in those last few solves.
That was an okayish square one average that held up the whole competition. Time for clock.
Speaking of clock finals. I knew in the back of my head going into this round that North American Championships, which I'm going to soon, has a qualification time of under 10 seconds for clock, and so I really wanted to try and go for that. It was looking pretty possible after those first 3 solves, especially with that nice 8-second PR single, but then I got nervous and things quickly went downhill with a worse average than the first round, so I guess no clock at North American Championships for me.
I don't think that average quite beat my PR from yesterday, but that 8-second PR single is really nice. Next up is Skewb Finals, where hopefully we can podium.
In the very first solve of Skewb Finals, I got a case I didn't recognize. I did it wrong and very slowly, giving me a 5 center case, which is also very slow, and got a 9-second solve. Then in the second solve, I got a case that I'm very slow at recognizing. It took me 7 seconds to do 3 sledges, so that gave me a counting 8-second solve, which basically ruined my average. So despite finishing the average with a counting 4, which would normally be very good, I ended up with a 6-second average, which is very slow, ended up in 7th place, far, far away from the podium.
Well, messed that up real bad. Next up, Pyraminx Finals.
Come on, I have to think of something to say for another round of Pyraminx? Me slow at PokeCube.
And a terrible Pyraminx average as usual. Next up is, wait a minute, am I done? Yeah, I thought I might be able to sneak into 2x2 finals, but it looks like I am finished. So overall, over 2 days, I managed to compete in 23 different rounds and set 12 PRs, which is way better than I was expecting. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the competition. I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time.